Warframe's new GI lighting system has come home to roost in our orbiters, and it is beautiful. But there are a few inconsistencies that I believe renders the lighting update incomplete, and I've recorded footage from before and after to show you. When we consider lighting as a storytelling tool, among its foremost qualities is color. Color shapes the mood and interpretation of light within a scene and maintains a sense of consistency between different scenes, shots, and the overall narrative, or in this instance, the set piece. The Helminth section is the best to showcase this, and this is my favorite improvement to the new orbiter. The way the objects in the environment blends with each other is such a huge improvement. I've used IATN sculptures to really show just how much better objects within the Helminth room feel like they are part of one scene rather than disparate parts. And the contrast between the red haze and the singular neutral light above the murder chair, it's fantastic. It's foreboding, it just works. I only have one small nitpick, but not within this room, rather just outside. That intense red glare just outside the door, those dark shadows permeated around its edges, gone. And replaced with something that, while it is an objective graphical improvement, falls short of its predecessor when it comes to demonstrating one vital aspect of lighting, and that is mood through color contrast. Now, don't get me wrong, overall I still think both versions look good, but looking at these Helminth entrances side by side, I think it's clear that the older version has a more stylized presence and feels more ominous, something I feel is truer to the nature and mood that is meant to be established when you look at this door. We see this as well at this T-shaped juncture, but here I want to talk about something else: texture. The orbiter is very old and it's had a lot of additions over time, and with this new lighting system I feel it's exposed just how much certain parts of the orbiter show their age. Certain more recent textures of the orbiter are quite beautiful, while others not so much.
Ugh. Brother, ugh. What's that? What's that, brother?
These were at least partially obscured by the contrast and shadows under the old lighting, but now these parts stick out like a sore thumb. Just looking at these three sections of the orbiter side by side, though they are of the same material, I think you can see the difference between them. These older textures seem inadequate for the new system, so I hope they can be addressed in one way or another. Look at these little guys. The more vibrant color, the greater contrast of light and shadow, there's a depth to these mini scenes that I feel isn't present in the T section I've just shown, and it's odd to see that be the case. Anyways, while we're here, I have for you a small collection of decorations to show how much better different objects fit into the scene. Much like the sculptures, pretty much everything has gone from obstructive glares to polished clarity, from overexposed to perfectly lit to their environment. I'm a big fan of how decorations metallics now look, and now that this video is done, I'm very much looking forward to replacing all the decorations I deleted to showcase how this new orbiter looks. Speaking of decorations, let's go outside. This here is an assembly of various decorations that produce light. I wanted to see if with this new system, we might be able to actually light up our environment. I'm sure many of you with extensive decorative fashion have noticed your orbiters looking a little dark. Out of all the decorations, I only found this Zeramin trophy to affect the environment directly, which to be honest, might be for the better. Best to stick with pseudo-light sources like these for now. As much as I'd love to be able to introduce my own custom lighting fixtures, that seems like a long shot due to dev time and resource restraints. So, sorry for putting that in your head. Alright, detour over. Let's talk about shadows. You can't have a scene without light, because without it, you'd see nothing. But you can't have a scene without shadows, because without those, you cannot shape the light in the ways you need your audience to see it. And one flaw I sometimes see in this new orbiter is that its use of shadows is inconsistent. In some instances, like in the operator's somatic chamber or the arsenal and the Liset, it's used quite beautifully. The way the backlight casts both light and shadow is so ethereal and fitting of the nature and subject that this room is dedicated to. The interplay between light and shadow seems harmonious here. Compare to my earlier example, and you can see how a lower light-shadow contrast flattens the composition of your set piece, even highlight the age of those certain textures that have not caught up to Warframe's modern state. Interestingly enough, here at the Somatic Chamber's front and side walls, I feel like there is a mixture of both these improvements and issues I've talked about so far. So here's a series of footage showcasing this. On the one hand, I can still tell that this new lighting system is an overall improvement, especially here in the Arsenal and the Liset. Here, these two sections receive the most drastic improvements, which makes sense given that these two areas are where we spend most of our time in the orbiter. Everything pulls together: color, light, texture, and shadow, even though they may not in other areas, and that is why I feel that the orbiter is not quite complete. These inconsistencies add up, and even though the orbiter has never looked better, I am left a little conflicted. The contrast and shadows that were once used to focus the lighting and build a certain ambiance in certain areas is noticeably diminished. Old textures now pop in strange ways, no longer able to pass muster when they once were at least obscured in shadows somewhat. But the orbiter is honestly beautiful, and I'm amazed by the work that has been put into it. Tile sets like Albrecht's Labs benefited from being built with GI lighting from the ground up, but clearly, translating an existing area presents different challenges to overcome, especially one as varied and historied as the orbiter. Overall, I hope from one thing from whatever changes DE may or may not make, even more than improvements to color contrast or texture or shadows alone, and that is consistency. A consistent lighting setup builds the character and feel of a place. It directs your audience to what is important and influences how they are supposed to feel when they look at it. Even in a static, non-combat set piece like the orbiter, story is king, and the feel of a place through its lighting tells that story. Thanks for watching. At the end of this video, I have a teaser of a Warframe related project that I've been working on for quite a while, so subscribe if you'd like to catch what comes next. Before I leave you, I have the final cinematic cutscene of the second dream, before and after GI lighting and their replacement voice actors. The VAs are great, both of them, but lighting wise, it's clear that whatever lighting changes that affected the orbiter didn't completely carry over to the cinematic, but there are still some differences, and they're not great. Keep in mind what I said about shadows when you watch. You'll see.
No self, no sense, no death. Just a metal puppet dangling on Tenno's strings. Only the Tenno's death will end your despair. All your dread-long life, you've waited for this moment. But you're asking yourself, was I one of these wretched things? You know the answer. You still hate them. You still hate yourself. What is this? Shadow.
Now we fight on two fronts, my child. The war without, and the war within. My child, so beautiful to behold. How do you feel?